That's right.
Anyway, I think we can start if everybody else is ready. And Andrew, welcome to this group discussion of the largest Indian group of Facebook in Auckland. It's called Indians Living in Auckland. It's got about 50,000 members. And what we have done today is we have also invited readers of Indian Newslink through our platforms. So you will be addressing a larger audience, and then we intend to put out this recording on all the platforms to which we have access. And with that, let me introduce you to the group, and then say a couple of words about the others. For those, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session. My name is Venkat from Indian Newslink, and I have the greatest of pleasure in introducing Andrew Bailey, Member of Parliament elected from Port Waikato, which is Pukekohe. That constituency name has undergone changes over the years. Andrew holds the record for the highest majority in National Party, the number of votes that he secured. The majority of votes was in excess of 19,000 at the 2020 election. And earlier on, he was in the Hanua constituency, as it was called. And Andrew has been a vibrant member of Parliament. He is a chartered accountant by profession. And he has started a merchant bank in Auckland. He has 10 years of experience in New Zealand and London in merchant banking. So he understands business as best as anybody else in the National Party would. And it's a real asset. Some of the unknown things about Andrew, I'll tell you. He was in the British Parachute Regiment.
Oh, wow.
And he was in the New Zealand Territorial Army. So he defends himself very well. And what do you know? He went on a trip, camel trip, in search of the Lawrence of Arabia in Jordan with his son. I don't know whether he met Peter O'Toole there. So that's Andrew for you. More than anything, he's a dear friend, an extremely nice person, like most national MPs are. And we have great pleasure in welcoming him. And Andrew, for your information and for the information of others, we have Munish Bhatt. Munish is a great friend of mine. He's been for many, many years. He used to work for the government of New Zealand, and he had enough of that, and he joined the private sector. He joined Barfoot and Thompson as a real estate agent 6 years ago, and now he's been appointed as the manager of the Mangere branch, the newest branch of Barfoot and Thompson. And he's there to sell properties to those who are in need of them. Munish, it's a great pleasure to have you. And before I request you to say something, let me introduce you to Rashna Tata. The only thing that is not rich about her is that she doesn't belong to the Tata family. Otherwise, she's very rich in culture, in knowledge, in friendship. She's a community leader, and she's got media experience of almost 20 years, Andrew, here in New Zealand. So she can be as tough as a journalist can be, but she's a Rotarian by practice, and she lives in East Auckland, and she was the president of what is known as the Zoroastrian Association, a community which is known for its enterprise. And then we have Vasu Kunapuli, an IT wizard who's been my friend for almost 10 to 15 years. He has set it up today, this IT arrangement. Welcome, Vasu. And we have Ambrish, as I mentioned to you. He's another IT genius. With this ado, may I ask Munish to start the proceedings. Munish Bhatt.
Thank you, Venkat, and welcome, Andrew. Andrew, I've been a member of your constituency, and we have met before at Lucky's Place, if you remember.
Yes, of course.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about this group. This is one of the very active and one of the pioneer Facebook group of the Indian community with close to 50,000 membership. This group has helped many new immigrants with various settlement needs. It's like a big family where we come and share common interests, cricket, Bollywood, friendly banter. Yeah, it's about empowering the entire community. And I'll give you a classic example. Once I was doing an open home a year ago in Papatoy, and I met a young boy who was kind of, I said, "What are you doing here? You were supposed to be out. I'm supposed to do the open home here." And he said, "I don't have a place to go. I don't have money to put, gas in my car. I'm a new immigrant." I did a live feed, and he got close to 7 or 8 job offers within an hour. So that's the power
Yeah.
of the group. Yeah. And this group has helped many organizations raise funds, as well as many local artists to promote their events. So in all, it's a community, by the community, for the community kind of group. And yeah, Rasna is also a part of it. Venkat is there. Yes, everybody's there. Vasu is there. Yes, everybody's there. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Great, Monish. Now, Rashna, would you please start, and then you moderate. You are the moderator, and please start the proceedings.
Certainly. Thank you, Venkat. We have with us the elected member of Parliament, Andrew Bailey, a member of the National Party and representing Port Waikato. Good afternoon to you, sir, and may I call you Andrew?
Of course.
As Venkat mentioned, my name is Rashna Tata, and of course he said, I'm not a part of the Tata family, but well, I do claim some relationship from the in-laws. And I'm a moderator for this group. Munish asked me to join the group around August, and I have to say I thoroughly enjoy reacting with this group. Just a few days ago, we had somebody saying he was going to lose his job in December, needed another IT job immediately to be able to qualify for his visa. And in half an hour, we had about 7 people asking him to get in touch with them and offering a job. This is what I like about this group. You're giving out your information as in, I'm doing home meals, I'm, doing this kind of service to the community, and we're all connecting. We're all far from family, but, we consider this one big family of almost 50,000 people. So we're hoping that, we are the Indian voice of Auckland. And we're very happy that we've got this platform along with, Venkatji and the Indian Newslink, where we collaborate and we have at least one discussion every month. So, it is the place that, we as the largest Facebook group of the Indian community in Auckland and growing every day, we are now, here to, put our views to you, let you know what, matters to us, what concerns us. It is a live platform to ask the questions that are relevant to our members and raise the issues of concern to them. It also keeps them updated on relevant news and views. And this Facebook group provides them with an avenue to seek and gain information that matters to them personally and as a community. It also gives them the opportunity to be heard and updated. Why should they be voting for national in the next election? We're going to have Andrew convince us today. So we throw the floor open to our members, and Andrew, we pick up the most frequently.
Before that, Rashna, sorry for the interruption. Yeah. I think we should request Andrew for an opening
I was statement. Just about to do that, Venkat.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you very much, Andrew, for your time, and we'd love you to share a few words with us.
Well, thank you very much. And first of all, Sat Shri Akal, Namaste, Kamchu, Vinakam. Hey, absolute pleasure. First of all, I'd just like to acknowledge Venkat for organising this. And as he said, we've known each other for a while, and it is a wonderful, and also for all the other people who are on the panel today. Look, I understand, National Party understands what a huge contribution that the Indian community make to New Zealand. And I think with this platform, 50,000 people, as you say, this is a great chance for anyone who's on this platform to ask a question today. I'm very open about it. So let's roll.
Thank you very much. Venkat, can we continue, or would you like to say something?
No, I will come in from time to time, because I'm sure you've got a lot of questions.
Yes.
Please carry on, and then perhaps after the first or second question, I would like to ask Andrew something.
Certainly, Venkat. Andrew, we're here to start the questions. Like I said, you know, we're not having everybody sort of join in to ask questions. That would turn it into a bit of a fish market. So, you know, the questions have come to us. We have a link where they send it to us, and we've picked out the best questions to put to you. So on to our first question, because I know we're aware we have you for a limited time. Your views on the New Zealand superannuation and retirement bill. It was a very special moment for you to get that bill passed while being an opposition member. Please, if you would kindly elaborate for us.
Hey, well, look, I picked up the bill from Mark Patterson. He was a former New Zealand First MP, and he approached me and said, could you take over the bill? And it had been passed at first reading, but the bill, when it was introduced, was very hard hitting. It said that immediately on the bill being signed into law, basically anyone would have to spend 20 years before they got entitled to full 20%, full superannuation in New Zealand. Obviously, the bill needed a lot of work, so I worked with the Labour Party, and I'd like to acknowledge Minister Sepuloni too in this process. She and I really worked with the bill and the Finance and Expenditure Committee. What we've ended up doing is increasing the requirement for new immigrants. Obviously, for people here, there's a very much longer, there's a 10-year phase-in period. So if you've been here and living here for quite some time, you're probably unlikely to be affected by it or minimally affected. But what it's saying is for new immigrants to come into New Zealand, they will ultimately have to meet the 20-year rule. And the reason we've moved to that is that New Zealand and Australia are very unusual. We're the only two countries in the world where we do allow people to have access to New Zealand super after 10 years, although Australia means test it. And what we're trying to do is bring New Zealand back into the realm of where all the other countries are overseas. But to do it in a fair way. So as I say, there's a 10-year phase-in period, so people can plan for it. And basically, what will happen is that you'll have to work as you come in, you'll have to work for a slightly longer period of time. We have set aside people who are refugees. They are not subject to an increase in the requirement, and we've also excluded the New Zealand realm countries like Cook's Islands and Niue and places like that.
So Andrew, when does this take effect, and then what is the likely financial impact? How much money will the government save because of this?
Yeah, well, the bill, one of the changes that we made at a late stage, and this is something I agreed with the minister, was that would not change, no change until the 1st of July 2023. And then from there, it's rolled out over a 10-year phase-in period. So there's no immediate change for at least a couple of years and then phased in. In terms of monetary value, we actually don't think it will affect many people. The estimates were about 6,000 people might be affected by this, but whether that number is right or wrong, but over time it will save in the order of probably up to a couple of $100 million a year. But that'll take quite a long period of time before you get to that stage. Now, one of the biggest things for New Zealand is New Zealand super is basically one of the highest single costs that we have. You know, we obviously spend a lot of money on health services, about 22 billion, 23 billion. Education services about 16, but New Zealand super is one of the probably the next highest single cost. And if you look at the projections for New Zealand super, as the average age of New Zealanders increases, it becomes very, very significant and quickly becomes one of the largest component of government expenditure. So looking for ways to make it more fair, but also affordable. So, you know, for instance, National doesn't want to see any means testing. We're totally opposed to that. But we have talked about extending the start date out to 67 from 65 as people's age of well, the lifespan is longer, but we were proposing to do that in 2040. So, you know, that's nearly 18 years away. So again, we're trying to give people a pathway, can see what's going to happen, but make sure it's done in a slow but progressive manner over time.
Excellent.
Thank you.
On to my next question, if I may. In your opinion, Andrew, will the traffic light system work? Auckland businesses, especially hospitality, are under great stress and are still feeling uncertain. What are your recommendations?
Well, in my role as Shadow Treasurer, we announced an economic plan that what we would have done if we were in the government, and we announced it back in October, early October. That included a whole range of aspects like tax cuts to businesses through to making it easier how you manage your business and put more money into investing in good productive plant and equipment to deal with the labour issue. But specifically what you're asking about with the hospitality industry, we had made 3 specific recommendations, or what we would have done. The first thing we would have done for food companies, the cafes, is that we would have cut through all council processes, and we will allow people to have al fresco dining on the pavements, obviously within constraints, but allow people to sit outside and actually have meals, because we're really worried about the cafe owners. That's the first thing. With the second thing is with tourism businesses, we looked at a number of examples, and Chris Luxton was actually involved in this through Air New Zealand. We looked at a number of options of how we could help them. We thought the New South Wales model of giving vouchers, and we announced that we were going to give everyone a $100 voucher in Auckland to be able to go and spend in a cafe or some hospitality, and to do that over the summer. So to get quickly used, that was a $100 million program for $100 per person, and easy to do it. And then the third thing we looked at was around the events sector. We're very worried about the events sector, and I know the events sector have been lobbying the government for 18 months. And I personally spoke to one of the brokers. What we were prepared to do is, what we should have done and what we would have done if we were in government, is that we would have taken on liability insurance for events, $50 million liability, would have cost about $5 million premium that the government would have paid up front. And as event organisers took the risk of putting on events, they could have picked up a share of that insurance from the government and paid us the appropriate premium out of that. But all it required was the government to actually up front and pay the fee up front, the $5 million. And given we're borrowing $110 million a day, and I'll say that again, given we're borrowing $110 million a day, we think that would have been an absolute great investment. So those are the 3 areas specifically to deal with the hospitality. Now, the government sort of picked up on elements of them, but I don't think very robustly, actually.
Those were extremely sensible suggestions, and it's a pity that they weren't put into action. Andrew, Venkat, do you want to talk?
Yeah, Russell, just your second element to your question was, what do I think it's going to happen now? Well, unfortunately, until the 15th of December, we've got 2 systems in place, right? We've got the traffic light systems, and when my electorate down the south part of Auckland, actually I've got this other system in place. So my office has been inundated with people not knowing what's going on and which rules apply, actually, because they're quite confusing. We need to get our hospitality businesses working. What worries me is that the government now requires a cafe owner to check on your phone whether you've been vaccinated. And I went to a cafe yesterday in Pukekohe, and one of the owners was outside checking my vaccination. And I said, well, what are you doing here? And he said, I've got to do that. I'm required to do that. There's no cost. There's a major cost for the business for doing that, because he wanted to be inside. He was a business owner. He wanted to be inside serving, doing all that other stuff, yet he was required to be outside. So there was no compensation for that. The second thing the government has done is that they have said if you have an unvaccinated cafe worker, the business has to pay 4 weeks notice before they get rid of it. So again, the government is imposing additional costs on businesses. And this is the thing that I find really offensive, given that, particularly in Auckland and the Waikato, but it's not only in those areas, these businesses have been struggling for cash. And this is the first time they have the opportunity to get some money in the door, because once they get to January, most of them are going to have to pay tax in January and again in February, your terminal tax. Where do they get the cash? And all the government's doing is just loading them up with obligations and, in effect, costs, because all those things come with a cost.
Absolutely true, Andrew. I was at a hairdresser the other day, and the poor girl at the door was also getting a lot of flack and abuse.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Something they don't need.
Yeah, and hey, come into my cafe, but first I've got to check whether you can come in here. No, you can't. What a dreadful conversation to be having with someone you're trying to give an experience to, which is what you do when you go to a cafe, restaurant, wherever you're going. It's just counterproductive.
Absolutely, absolutely. Venkat, would you like to say something?
No, Andrew is very articulate on that, and I think he's made it very clear as to what the situation is. I agree with you, Andrew, that this is not the time for people to be spending time outdoor checking vaccine passes and so on.
Yeah.
Many of your proposals appeal to me, and I hope that when we put out the story, the Minister for Finance will listen and then do something about it.
Well, they've done parts of it, but in my view, they haven't done them effectively. Like they've talked about vouchers, but there are only 2 Auckland Council sites. What is that about?
Yeah.
What
correct,
about,
yeah.
there's not everything rules around local government and also central government, but unfortunately we have a government that thinks everything's ruled by government. It's not. You should have given those vouchers, and that's why the New South Wales scheme was so successful. And in fact, you could have rolled it out and done the first $100 and then do another $100 very easily. But it's about getting across, all the different events that you want to take young children to. Not everyone wants to go to a regional park. I know they're great, but not everyone wants to. And the insurance scheme, they've done it, but for only a very, very small portion of events. And of course, we've seen Rhythm and Vines postponed. Those are huge costs and huge risks for promoters. And what they need is a government to stand behind them to say, look, we want you to do them. Of course, we want people to be vaccinated and do all that sort of stuff, right? But we want these events to go ahead because that's what New Zealanders want to go and enjoy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
On to my next question now, Andrew. What strategy would you adopt to improve business confidence? Now, this is a question we have received from a number of business owners and our members, and all of them have this to say, and I quote, "I'm the owner of a company employing other staff, but I'm not sure I can survive another lockdown. What is the way forward according to the National Party?"
Yeah, that's a wide-ranging question. So the first issue is the one of COVID. So we're fully supportive of getting as many people vaccinated as possible. So it's great. We've got near 90% in Auckland and across the country. But we have a strong view that once we get to that, we actually said 85 to 90, but we're close to 90. Once we get to the 90%, we should stop all these restrictions. We are one of the most highly vaccinated countries in the world. Obviously, there'll be certain restrictions on those who choose not to be vaccinated, and that's their prerogative. I think we've got to accept some people don't want to for certain reasons. Sometimes they're very good reasons. Other times they just have a different view on it. But once we get to that stage of 90%, stop the shackles, allow people to go out and do their thing. And of course, we need to be mindful, and that still means masks. But all these lockdowns are incredibly damaging. Let's stop that. So that's the first thing, allow people to get on with their lives. The second thing with regard to businesses, part of that package I talked about, there were 4 key elements, but one of them was to get more money back into the pockets of particularly small business owners, because businesses fail when they either can't pay their GST, or they can't pay their wages or the PAYE. And what worries me, particularly in Auckland and Hamilton, is that most businesses are right now at the end of their tether. They've had 5 lockdowns. Most people, if they've mortgaged themselves to the help, they're just hoping they can get through it. So part of the package we offered was to reduce the tax rate for small businesses. Anyone employed less than 20 or 19 and fewer employees, down to 17.5%. For a period of 2 years. So we're hopefully not going to try and keep more money in the businesses. The second thing, we are strongly of the view that the government should extend the loss carryback scheme, which means that if you were incurring a loss this year, you could go back, and in our view, what we recommended was go back 4 years. The government previously for last year allowed it to go back for 2 years, but they haven't carried the scheme forward for this year. We wanted to carry it forward to this financial year, where we're still having more lockdowns, and be able to go back, and if you've made profits in prior years, up to 4 years ago, you could actually get a tax rebate from the IRD. Another way of getting money into businesses. Then and there were a whole lot of other cash ones, but the other big thing I've got, my big view is if you think 2020 was bad for Labor, I think, sorry, and 2021, I think 2022 is going to be worse for 3 reasons. The first reason is that what's happened is that we've had 160,000 people, immigrants here, that have not had their visa given to them. I think it's outrageous. The minister has finally announced that they're going to issue about 160,000 visas. The first question is whether Immigration New Zealand has that capability to do that quickly. The second thing is we've got Australian and Canadian firms aggressively recruiting people in New Zealand. And the third thing is we have trashed our reputation as a place to come and immigrate to. So I think if we're hoping that people are going to come to New Zealand easily and want to come here, well, actually, I don't think it's going to be the case. And a lot of these people have been on these short-term visas. As soon as they get a visa, proper visa, they'll immigrate back to a place like Australia. And I think there's going to be a double-edged sword. And so that was why we were had announced back in the election. I was part of the announcement of it back in the election, but we re-announced the fact that companies should be able to write off up to 150,000 of really buying brand new productive plant and equipment to actually help deal with this issue of labour, but also to deal with productivity. So these are some of the areas of confidence, but also just being clear that we do support business people. We know what it is. You know, most of the National Party people have come from a business background. We know what the element of cash is and how important that is to you.
Absolutely. Andrew, on to my next question. Now, this concerns a number of national MPs have said the same thing. The lack of transparency of some of the Labour government spending programs. Would you care to elaborate on that?
Yes, well, this is something I've been exposing with Mr. Grant Robertson. So just to give a context, if you go back to March last year, when COVID first showed up on our shores, we had net debt of about 60 billion in New Zealand. It was actually very low. It's about 20% of GDP. Today, it's just over 120 billion. So we put on roughly 60 billion over the last 18 months. And just to finish the story, under Treasury projections in the next 3 years, it's expected to increase by another 60 million to get to 183 billion. So we're going from 60 to 183 billion in 3 years' time. Part of the spend that Grant's done this year, Grant Robertson, look, most of it we don't have a problem with. The wage subsidy, the business resurgence supports them. There are elements that I've talked about that I've already highlighted. I think he could have done slightly differently. But in the main, look, we are supportive of it. It was getting money out the door to businesses. But of the money that's been spent by the government, there is $12 billion worth of expenditure that we've identified, about 143 projects that are just outrageously nothing to do with COVID. The last one we identified only 3 weeks ago and exposed to the public was a $500,000 program funding an American organization to do a sort of matchmaking internet type scheme. Now, we've got other large programs right across all of government where money has gone into these programs, $12 billion, and they really have nothing to do with COVID, nor do they actually create permanent jobs, nor do they really stimulate economic activity. And that's what we're very concerned about. Now, put 12 billion into context, that would have given us one cross-harbour tunnel across Auckland. Would have dealt with all of Wellington's transport problems, about $6 billion worth of transport, and then we could have finished all the strategic roads that National wanted to build, which is about another 6 motorways. So the $12 billion is a lot of money, and it's just gone out the back door. And Grant, I wrote to the Auditor General. The Auditor General came back and agreed with me recently, about 10 days ago, and he publicly released this letter responding to my query to the Auditor General, saying that the government simply has not provided enough transparency around the spending, and the Auditor General agreed with me. So that's a pretty damning outcome. And I think, we just need a bit more financial discipline, and we're not seeing it from this government at the moment.
Thank you, Andrew. That was, interesting to hear. Now, there's something that we really want to ask you, and that is National has to climb up in the polls really fast. What is the strategy National is going to implement to improve poll ratings, especially under the new leadership of Christopher Luxon?
Hey, well, good question. Look, I haven't seen the polls, but I would imagine there's going to be quite a jump up in the polls anyway, with Christopher Luxon and Nicola Willis as his deputy. Obviously, Christopher is reforming the leadership team, and that'll be all announced on Monday. So I think there'll be a natural uplift. But part of what we've been working through over the last year or so is we just need to make sure what it is and we're saying and how we're talking to people is what they want to hear, and we're saying it in a way that people can understand it and is important to them. And so we've been doing quite a bit of work around going out and talking to people. We actually issued our first 2 policy papers. We did one which obviously the economic plan. We did a COVID plan. And we've actually did an educational plan just 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, and we've got more coming up. So part of that is just we've been out talking to people. We're showing that we can develop policies that resonate with people, are appropriate, because we've listened to them. And I think one of the clear things is just to be much more clear about it, what our message is, what we stand for, and having the team that's coherent and unified. And I think the lack of unity in our team, and I think we could deserve what we got in the election last year, because we didn't show unity, we didn't show leadership, and it's incumbent on us as MPs to make sure we all step up and do our fair share and actually get behind the leader and the deputy leader, and we will. That's part of the thing. So I think that issue around us and where we sit in the polls, I expect we'll see some movement in that pretty quickly.
Excellent. Yes, we've certainly seen, the entire National Party sort of come alive in the last 1 week, and we just hope, that's the momentum that the party keeps going. Andrew, just to ask you this, you have proposed that property owners must be given financial relief. With National, will National remove the non-deduction of loan interest from tax calculation for property investors? Okay,
so just make sure your audience understands what you're saying. So the government has proposed removing interest deductibility if you have an investment property. That's what you're referring to, isn't it, Rosna?
Yes, that is
right. And of course, it's a 4-year stage and period. So next year you'll only get 75% reduction, 50%, 25%, and then it phases out. Look, our view on this is most houses, investment houses, are owned by mum and dads, and they on average have one investment house. They do it as a form of savings for their future, and of course all those houses are rented out. And in the main, most are fantastic landlords. Obviously, there are always some landlords that are not, but they're in the main, they're fantastic landlords. We do not accept the proposition from the government that they should be penalised as if there's some form of nasty landlord that needs to have an imposition of a huge amount of or lack of interest deductibility. The second thing is there's a fundamental principle in tax that you should have the capability to deduct business-related expenditure. It cuts through all types of tax, right? And for some reason, the government has now chosen to say that fundamental tenet or principle, we're going to change it for housing. And so what is likely going to happen is we're going to see some people who've geared up the properties, and a lot of people have had to gear up, taken a mortgage to buy that rental or that investment property, and they will sell it. And that will mean that it'll be sold on the open market and probably end up being someone's home. So the rental market will be more constrained. So our lower income people are going to be worse off. So all that's going to be bad, right? So we are clear on this. We will reverse those changes. And we've also said the bright line changes. We brought in the new bright line, and just to explain the bright line, that is the issue around effectively when you pay capital gains on your property. So we brought in a bright line to stop that flipping of properties any time within 2 years. The government came in and immediately increased that to 5, and now they're going to increase it to 10. We don't believe 10 years is an appropriate period of time, because on average, people move a house every 7 years. That's been long-term historical average. And so we're now going to capture a whole lot of people who either have to stay in their home or naturally have to move because they have to start a family, they buy a small house, start a family, so they have to upgrade. Hey, guess what? They're now going to pay capital gains tax on it. So we will also reverse that bright line test as well.
Excellent.
Is that clear enough for you?
Yes, it is. It is. And you've given us, enough food for thought, Andrew, and we appreciate that. Now, the other thing we needed to ask you was, and this was again, a question that bothered most members, what should the government do if New Zealand gets cases of the new variant, Omicron? Because it is, spreading, and it is there slowly but surely in Australia and many major cities in the world.
Hey, look, I think if we all think that just because we've dealt with Delta or Omicron, it's all going to be finished, I think we've probably got to take a much longer view on the COVID. COVID is a form of SARS, and remember the SARS outbreak was many years, 10 years ago, whatever it is now. So I think we've got to learn to live with COVID. And of course, that's why it was so important to get to a high vaccination rate. It's probably highly likely we're going to have booster shots. But if anyone is sitting there thinking, oh, just because we've dealt with Delta or whatever, it's all over and we don't need to worry about it, I don't think that's a realistic proposition. So the reality, we need to learn to live with this. That means keeping the population vaccinated, still applying health and safety measures like mask wearing and all that sort of stuff. And that may become something that we get used to for quite some period of time. But the other thing, in a more fundamental level, see, we would have never put our MIQs in the middle of the busiest city in New Zealand. We just thought that was an absurd proposition. Now we're at 18 months, and this could go on for a long period of time. Actually, that's probably part of the problem why we keep getting all these infections. They all get tested, and we've moved to different testing regimes, and we're now home detention or home. You can stay at home and do your period of time like that, and we've got smart guys looking at how you use technologies. But packing up people in Holly Hills in the middle of the busiest city in New Zealand is an absurd proposition, and we would have never have done that. So part of that is how we move forward on that. We've talked about actually if this is going to be something, we need to move those facilities out of these very busy areas.
Thank you, Andrew. Now, this is something you have touched on briefly, and I'm just wanting to bring it up because, it has come up from a number of members. And what is your party's policy on bringing stranded migrants back home? Migrants who left on a holiday to see family for just maybe 4 weeks before the first lockdown was announced last year. Now they've lost their visas, their jobs, their belongings, and their whole lives. The suffering is unimaginable. And we have this coming up on our page constantly with examples and, names and people who are stuck. And it is very genuine. So what is the solution to this?
Hey, I've got to say to you, Rasna, as a local MP, I'm sitting in the southern border of Auckland. I've been dealing with about 100 calls or emails a day, on average, every day for the last 13 weeks. And the stories that I've heard and had to deal with, from suicide through to family members dying and people can't get over the border, through to businesses going broke because there's one person missing from the business, like an exporter who must have a quality control person there. If they're not there, they can't operate and export. All the most horrendous stories you can think about, and people's lives been broken apart. It has been heart-wrenching for New Zealanders and for people, family members trying to get back home. So part of the issue is the government has run this weird MIQ system that has slowed down the ability to process people coming back. And of course, the Indian community has been hugely affected by this. So what we proposed, and the government's sort of slowly working to it, is we think the nose test is one option, but you can actually do quick tests every day. And so that always gave the opportunity for people to go move back into a home environment where they could have been electronically monitored. There's systems all in place for that. We need to deploy these technologies. The government seems incredibly slow about doing this. That means we can get more people back over the border, but we need to make sure they're going to a safe place and they're not going to affect the rest of New Zealanders. And we just need to open up and move away from this lottery of misery, as my colleague Chris Bishop talks about, which is people sitting on hoping that they can get across the border. And in many cases, the big issue, I think, is there's no prioritization. Like I've had people whose father has died, been killed in accident, and I've had people trying to get back from Australia and simply cannot get through. Whereas we've got people who are coming back on a holiday or something just to see their family members, which is important, but actually in the scheme of not as important as other cases. So this lack of prioritization has been the other issue. So I've got many Indian members in my community here in Pukekohe, and I know firsthand that so many have been stranded over there. So part of it is dealing with the MIQ, dealing with the border issue, allowing people to come back, provided they've been suitably tested and done all that sort of stuff, and make sure they can come to a safe place and continue that testing much more rapidly. Doing periodic testing of the nasal testing rather than doing ones every day, which is very easy to administer. That's the type of technology we should be moving to. That's how you deal with this issue.
Absolutely. Thank you very much on that, Andrew. Now to my next question. What is your action plan for businesses suffering in the Auckland CBD because of the light rail system?
Yeah, a very good question. So I was going to do a story on this, and then the
for me, I hope.
Yeah, we were just planning it because I've had quite a bit to do with the heart of the city, and that is a major problem. This is something I was looking at in my infrastructure role. I think it's absolutely wrong that big construction projects can take place and not compensate business owners and people using that part of the city. So this is something that's very precious to me, because many years ago, before I went into Parliament, the Auckland Council asked me to act for them to try and get all the fibre companies who were busy ripping up the CBD, Auckland CBD, to lay fibre. Do you remember this about 15 years ago? And so
Yeah.
one would go rip down the main street, plough up the footpath, reseal it, and then a couple of months later it'll happen again. So they asked me to negotiate with these fibre companies, and I did that. And when I had my first meeting, I said to all these big fibre companies, "Now, guess what? You're all now going to work in this together. So when we go down one road, like Queen Street or Fort Street or whatever, you're all going to put your fibre in at the same time. And we're not going to allow you to do it. And if you don't get in when people are going down that one, you're going to have to wait." And of course, they all went, "Oh, you can't do that." Well, actually, after 6 months, they not only agreed that they would do it, but they wanted to do it because it meant that it was advantageous from a cost perspective. So the outcome of that is we changed the legislation for the Telco Act, worked with the Auckland Council to do it, to force those telcos to have to reimburse and have regard to the business owners, pedestrian traffic, all that sort of stuff. Now, my view is that model should apply to what's happened with that Central Rail Loop. We've had water care ripping out the bottom of the town. We need a model where people know what compensation they're going to get, and it's a pretty easy model. If your business burns down, you will have what's called a loss adjuster, insurance person, specialist, comes into your business and says to you, right, you're earning 100,000 of profit, the decline is this, they can value it and you get compensation for it. We need to move to a model that makes sure that people are properly recompensed, and actually the whole consultation, consultation in New Zealand's become, I think, just a process. It's not about determining valuable outcomes. And I think there's a number of projects where consultation hasn't been actually proper listening to people and responding. It's just ticking the box. And I think the huge impact on Albert Street and those businesses, and I know some of them gone broke, the Italian restaurant, I had a meeting with about 7 or 8 business owners along there just late last year actually, and it's wrong. The government should have compensated them, and of course Auckland Council was part of that. Reducing rates is one part of it, but hey, when you've got a business that was making a lot of money and goes to nothing, people go broke. That's how they go broke. Not because they were badly managed or anything. It's because council or the government has made a major infrastructure change.
Absolutely. Andrew, I can't agree more with you. I actually worked at Albert Street for more than 14 years at the New Zealand Herald building. And every little business that we sort of, patronized are all gone. It's heart-wrenching. Absolutely heart-wrenching.
Yeah, and so we just need a model. The government, Michael Wood has announced something, but to be honest, I don't think it's meaningful, and I don't know there's no criteria. If you're going to make an announcement, you could have worked out the criteria. There are plenty of examples, and I've been looking at examples around the world where it's a slightly different arrangement, but if you're going to build a new road, people have very clear expectations on what they will get if their house gets taken from them. Like the French model have a example where they pay 20% premium, and everyone knows they're going to get more than what their house is worth, right? And so part of that is allowing infrastructure to proceed much more quickly, which is one of the biggest issues in infrastructure projects. Is if you have a delay, it's huge costs, but also giving certainty to people who are affected. And so they can plan for their lives, move on. It's all part of that, what we're talking about before.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that. Unfortunately, this is what it is. And we just hope, there is an end to their misery soon.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah. Andrew, I am moving on to my next question. And your personal view has been that water is a huge strategic asset for New Zealand, and we're not using it, strategically. Your thoughts on that?
Hey, well, very good question. Yeah, yes, I do think water is one of the greatest strategic assets of New Zealand. If you think about climate change, what the effect of climate change is that you get more extreme weather events. In fact, I was on a thing I co-chair the Antarctic Parliamentary Group, and I was on the thing at 3 o'clock last night, 2 nights ago. What happens is very extreme issues, but one of the things for New Zealand, but certainly across the middle part of the world, the equator area, the extreme lack of water is going to get even more paramount. So it is, apart from our people, one of the most strategic advantages. And so what do we do in New Zealand? What we've done is allowed it to be managed by 67 councils who want to wrap it up in consents and do all that sort of stuff. So right here at Pukekohe, I've got all these wonderful growers on this most beautiful soil, which the thing about Pukekohe, you can grow 365 days a year. The restrictions now on storing water, and by the way, New Zealand only captures 2% of the water that lands on the land. The restrictions around storing water are increasingly burdensome. Can't do it. The ability to use water, the reprioritization of water use. So, you know, apart from people's immediate needs of drinking and things like that, one of the next highest needs, if we go to Maslow's, needs to be able to eat. And of course, our growers here need a lot of water to grow their veggies and horticultural crops. So in summer, often they become like number 3 on the list. They should actually be very high in priority. So what my view is, as a government, we should be standing back and being much more strategic. How do we use water much more strategically to support existing industries like horticulture? We've got huge hydrogen opportunities down the South Island. And of course, people want clean, green hydrogen. They want green, not brown hydrogen. Green hydrogen means it come from hydro sources rather than being out of a coal-fired factory or gas-fired. So we have that in New Zealand. And then we've got all the other opportunities about what we do with our excess water, you know, and I think we just need to be much more strategic. And that's where I think one place where we need to take it out of council control and say, over the next 50 years, what are we going to do with water? And if you go to places like America, there was a very wealthy guy, a billionaire, Boone Pickens, who was buying up all the water rights around America, Midwest, 25 years ago. A lot of people see the value in water, and what we don't want to do is lose this precious commodity, but actually help to make New Zealand more sustainable, more profitable, and grow a lot of economic growth.
Absolutely. Andrew, you have advocated National's big fixes to make New Zealand the best place it can be. Your views on that, please.
Yeah, well, this is all part of rolling out and showing that National Party is innovative, is listening to people's concerns. And so what we're doing with the big fixes, this is the sort of the first bit, well, second bit, because we've already engaged over the last year. All of us have been out talking to the people and the key industries or different organizational people involved in our spokesmanship roles. So what we've done is we've done a couple of big fixes already, which is asking the general public and people in the industries or whatever they might be, what are the big issues? Like one I'm involved in is how do we increase New Zealand's cost incomes, because that's a way of lifting living standards. So that's going to come out in the new year. And so what we've put in that is a whole stack of different aspects around how do you drive productivity, how do we improve educational skills, how do we improve, make businesses work quicker, how do we deal with regulations, you know, a whole stack of questions. And what we're trying to do is get feedback on that from everyone, and then we will look at that and use that to formulate our final policies that we'll take into the 23 election. So what we don't want to do is sit there and do nothing, or even worse, have 130 working parties when we get into power, because we want to be able to roll in 23. If we're lucky enough to be and successful and being elected, we want to be moving straight away and know exactly what we want to do.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think, Andrew, we have reached almost the end of this session. Quite frankly, Andrew, we can go on and on and on, because you come up with absolute stunning responses which are practical. I'm sure you will have many more opportunities to talk to us. What in 2 words can say is that makes sense. That's what you do. You make sense of whatever you say. We'll have many more opportunities, Andrew. We have reached the end of our session because we promised that we'll let you go in 1 hour. And it's just exactly on the dot of 4 o'clock. Is there anything else you want to say, Andrew?
Hey, look, first of all, I just want to acknowledge you, Venkat, for organising this, and Razna for your interviewing and the panel. And thank you for all your listeners for the questions. They're very good questions, by the way.